Nicole Purvy here, real estate investor and the founder of the Better Than Success Real Estate League. And today I have a super dope video that I know is going to help you out in your investing journey. And it's actually the first in a two-part series. One of the things that people always talk about is like how much money they need to actually do their first deal. That's one of the questions that new investors have. And even some advanced investors, they're always looking for easier ways to calculate how much money they need to bring to the table. What I typically tell new investors is if you're in Philadelphia, unless you have access to $50,000, then you're just, you're not going to be able to get started. You need access to $50,000 if you plan on investing in Philly. And so a lot of times people just take me on my word. Okay, I need $50,000. Okay, I'll go and get that and come back. But very infrequently, I get people to like ask me questions like, hey, how did you get to that number? And so I usually break it down for them. But I figured, because I know I'm a very inquisitive person, if someone told me that, I would ask. And I figured I would make a video to show you guys the calculation. So that's going to be in the first part. The second part of this video is going to show you how you can come up with the $50,000. So that essentially you are doing real estate with $0 out of pocket, which is what I've been able to do. If you don't live in Philadelphia, or if you don't invest in Philadelphia, another way of coming up with this calculation is to say, hey, this is what we at BTS Funding, the hard money lender brokerage that I own, we typically tell people that they're going to need 35%, at least 35% of the rehab and acquisition cost, the total rehab and acquisition cost. That's going to get you in the game. Like that'll help you to understand what you're going to need. Once I started doing this math, and which I'm going to show you in a minute, another really easy way to do it is you can also say you're going to need about 25% of the ARV. 25% of the ARV. I'm going to show you. I've run so many scenarios and it usually comes out to about that. So these are estimates. Some of these scenarios are going to be slightly over and some of them are going to be slightly under, but it will help you to understand why you need $50,000 or 35% of the rehab and acquisition cost or 25% of the after repair value. I'm going to pause right here. If any of these terms are like over your head, I want you to go to betterthansuccess.com/free course and take our free course. And then come back here and it's all going to make so much more sense. Okay. So we're going to hop over to my computer screen so that you guys can see exactly where these magical numbers come up. All right, let's hop over to the computer screen. Okay. So here are a couple of things to remember. Let me kind of blow this up just a tad bit, just so you can see it. And I'm on Excel. It's like an ugly program because that's just what I'm on right now. You'll see I'm going to use these formulas. But let's just go over a couple of things about hard money loans, which we have tons of hard money loans on our videos on our channel. We have a whole playlist dedicated to them if you have questions. Typically, especially if you go through BTS Funding, we will lend up to 100% of the rehab and acquisition costs. That's up to 65% of the ARV. So we'll do 100%, but no more than 65% of the ARV. And so again, like I said, in Philly, I always kind of say you'll need about $50,000. Or if you're somewhere else, you're going to need 35% of the rehab and acquisition. The other thing to know about hard money loans as a refresher is that you will always need to have your first draw. So they will give you everything, but you're going to need to front a portion of the work, and then they're going to come and inspect it, and then they'll reimburse you, and so you can get busy. So that is partially why you're going to need this $50,000 or 35% of the rehab and acquisition or 25% of the ARV. That's partially why you're going to need it. So I'm going to show you guys the rest, right? Like literally break out the entire math of it. Okay. So I've run two different scenarios, 123 Main Street, right? And so let's say 123 Main Street. And this is why I say you need $50,000 if you're in Philadelphia, is because typically most of the properties in Philadelphia have an ARV of $200,000. That is why I say $50,000 in Philadelphia, right? Even some of my duplexes have ARV of like around 210 or something like that. So like that's just kind of standard. If you want to go after something smaller, some areas in North Philly or Southwest, you got some ARVs of 100, 130, but for the most part, most areas average around $200,000. So here's a scenario. Let's say you're buying a property around $50,000 and the rehab is $80,000. Now, this number that I came up with the rehab, I have said over and over and over again that a quick, rough and fuzzy number to figure out your rehab cost is $80 per square foot. Typically, Philly row homes are about 1,000 square feet. So if it's a full gut rehab, you're going to be spending about $80,000, right? I didn't just make that number up. Okay. So your total rehab and acquisition is $130. So what type of deal is this? This is going to be a 65% deal. Again, if this doesn't make sense to you, go back and watch those new classes, betterthansuccess.com/free course. So this is a 65% deal. You can't really find these that often. Actually, on Deal Hunting to Lunch Hour for the BTS Real Estate League, we had a magical 65% deal that came along, but 65% deal is ideal. Okay. So this is a 65% deal. So your first draw, if you're going to do 4 draws, which is pretty standard, you're going to need 20% of it, 4 or 5 draws, right? 4 or 5 is standard. Sometimes I go over. So 25%. So like if you want to make sure you're saving, you have as little money, like you're counting your pennies, 20% of the rehab cost, that is going to be 5 draws, right? So we've already worked out the math, and you can see my formulas here if you really, really care, right? Boom. Closing costs, 5% estimate. So your closing costs I put over here is going to be your title insurance and your transfer taxes. Let's remove that C there. Your title insurance and your transfer taxes. Now, in Philadelphia and specifically Pennsylvania, and I think Allegheny County, they have the highest transfer tax in the whole entire country. Philly is close, right behind Allegheny County. It's like over 4.25% or 4 and some change %, which is really, really high. So 5% for closing costs. You're going to need 6 months of interest payments, typically hard money loans, depending on your experience and who you go with. You're going to be paying 12% interest only payments, right? And so worked out the math on that, right? So on this loan, you're going to be paying $7,800 total in interest payments for 6 months. Depending on the size of the project, the property, you could be paying anywhere between 1 and 2 points at closing. That's the cost of the money, right? So you're going to be paying 1 point. For this, it's going to be $130. Your other holding costs I listed out here is your taxes, utilities, and your insurance. These are other holding costs that you're going to need. 3% estimate, and that's $3,900. Here's your miscellaneous. 5%, some people say 10%, but 5%, I've been able to get away with 5% on most projects until COVID happened. 65%. And so remember, I said they're going to lend you up to 65%, 100 of acquisition and rehab costs up to 65%. So what's the difference, right? So your difference is 0 here because remember, this is a 65% deal. So this is like the ideal deal. So your total is going to be 48 grand. Oh my God, that's really close to my estimated 50 grand. And so this is once we did the math and I used formulas. The percentage of the ARV you need to bring to the table, 24%. Remember, I said about 25%. And this is also the percentage of the rehab and acquisition that you need to bring to the table, 37%. That's close to the 35%. What? So all of our estimates are right? Okay. So again, these are estimates. Though these are estimates to help you understand which you're around about you're going to need to bring to the table. Now, as you put this property under contract, you need to know these line items. Like, okay, oh, it's going to end up being 37%. Cool. You're going to be figuring out these line items because the math will be there. All your numbers are going to be there. You know, you're going to be getting a HUD soon. Everything is going to be known. So you can then figure out your calculate everything so you know exactly what you need to get and bring to the closing table. So here's another one. This is in a more upscale area, right? For those of you who are not investing in Philly, your ARV's average ARV or the ARV of the property that you're looking at could be a lot higher. So here we decided to run it on a 70% deal, right? So the ARV of this deal is 500,000. Acquisition is 150. The rehab cost is 200,000. We just made that number up. I just made up a project. Okay. So your total, you're all in at 350. This is a 70% deal. This is still really, really juicy. So the same thing here. Your first draw, 20% of the rehab, 70 grand. Closing costs, 5% estimate, 7,500. 6 months of interest payments, 21,000. A point at closing, 3,500. Other holding costs, 3%, right? And if you forgot, here are the definitions of those other closing costs and your holding costs. Miscellaneous, 5%. And then you need to bring the difference to closing because remember, they're only going to do up to 65% of the ARV. So this is the difference, is 17.5. That's the difference, right? If you want to check me, you can look up here. Okay, so your total that you're going to need is 147.5. What percentage of the ARV is this? This is 30%. It's a little over the 25, but we're still in the ballpark. And what percentage of the rehab and acquisition do you need to bring to the table? 42%. It's a little over the 35, but we're still in the ballpark. And so I wanted to show you this. And again, these numbers are always going to be different because your mix of rehab and acquisition is going to be different for every single project. So that's going to change how much your first draw is going to be. That's going to change a whole bunch of stuff, right? If you're going over the 65% ARV, that's going to change that as well. And so I wanted to show you why the math works. And so I did something really fun here. I just figured out an average, right? What is the average of these four numbers, the ARV you need to bring to the table for these two, just these two deals, right? Like if we really wanted to figure out an average, we'll have to run so many more scenarios. But for this is 33%, right? Just for fun, I just did that. And that number means absolutely nothing. So I wanted to show you this. So now you know why you need, if you're in Philly, at least $50,000. And now you know why you need, no matter where you are, at least 35% of the rehab and acquisition or 25% of the ARV. And again, the numbers are never going to be exact because every deal is different, but this will help you to wrap your mind around what you need to bring to the table, what you're going to be spending it on, and why you're going to be spending that money and where you're going to like, okay, I need to make sure I have this for my interest payments and this is going to cost this, so on and so forth. Okay. So on the second part of this video, I'm going to talk to you about different ways that you can find your 50 grand or 35% of rehab and acquisition or 25% of your ARV. I'm going to talk to you about different ways that you can find it so you can do these deals with $0 out of pocket. Zero like that. Y'all see me down in the little thing? Okay. All right, landlords. Until next time, happy entrepreneuring.